You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 599, Endgame.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm John Champion. Each week on Mission Log, we celebrate Star Trek's journey, one episode at a time, and we try to figure out what we've learned along the way. Are there morals, meanings, and messages in that nebula, or just coffee?
This week, Endgame, the one where we start at the end, go back, and end it all again for a new beginning. Kind of like playing a favorite game.
I will be back with trivia in a moment, but first Norman will tell all of you how to reach us.
We'd love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and on Instagram and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near-daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways to help your favorite podcasts is to leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple or your preferred podcast platform. And remember, your comments could be used on the show. And now here's John Champion with this week's trivia.
All right, let's talk about Endgame. We have a story credited to Rick Berman, Ken Biller, and Brannon Braga. And as you might imagine, this was a moment in Voyager's run that took a lot of planning, really during the entirety of the season. But those bigger questions about how and even if the crew gets home were kicked around from the very beginning of the series. Brannon, at this point, was working on Enterprise, but he did work with Rick and Ken to contribute to this story. All three knew that they wanted something epic. They knew it would involve the Borg somehow, and they knew that there would be the bow to wrap up 7 years. Rick also knew that he wanted it to involve time travel, and they were all on the same page about the Borg Queen being the big bad. The teleplay is credited to Ken Biller and Robert Doherty, and for those two prominent names in Trek, this is the last time their names will appear professionally with the franchise. Robert's previous story credit was on Q2, and Ken had collaborated there with him and then continued on with a credit on Natural Law. It was directed by Alan Croker, and this is why he is the closer, the director who helmed more season and series enders for Star Trek than anyone else. And he'll be back again doing that and more on Enterprise. Now, this episode is a little odd in that it was aired as a single feature-length story, but it was written as two distinct scripts and produced that way right up until the end. There was no break, though, so Alan Croker was in it for the long haul, getting script revisions right up until the very end. And those script pages, by the way, were protected under lock and key. Many members of the cast and crew only got limited selections of the script, and even though there was a lot of press attention, they were well guarded against any leaks. And yes, the ending was bittersweet. There was the usual occurrence of goodbyes and tears shed and celebrating each person as they wrapped, but it was also an inglorious end by some accounts. The bulk of the cast were not on set for the final day of shooting, and sets were being torn down literally as soon as filming was done in each space in order to immediately make room for Enterprise. Now let's meet our guest stars. As you might expect, there are a lot of returning familiar characters here to say goodbye. Reg Barclay, Owen Paris, Icheb. But let's point out a few of the different ones, though. Now, there are a number of smaller and uncredited roles in this episode. You got a lot of background players and even a number of cadets who we see at Starfleet. We'll just point out one, though, going under the single name Jesse. He was on set as part of the Make-A-Wish program. So nice to see him there in a cameo. The Doctor, in his alternate future, is married to a human woman named Lana. She is played by Amy Lindsay, who has made TV appearances on shows like Pacific Blue and Silk Stockings, not to mention a number of late-night projects you might have seen turn up on Cinemax. In recent years, she has worked behind the scenes as a first AD and in the makeup department of different projects. Lisa Locicero plays the older version of Miral. She is currently best known as a regular on General Hospital, but Lisa has turned up on any number of TV guest roles since the early 90s. In YPD Blue, Joey, one of my all-time favorites, Reno 911. She even lends her voice to a few Star Trek video games if you're looking for an additional franchise connection, though this episode is her only on-screen Trek role. Speaking of Trek actors who also appear in video games, Vaughn Armstrong is back, and while we have said so much about Vaughn in the past, and we will have more to share in the future, it's absolutely worth noting here that he is playing Koroth, a character who is invented for Star Trek The Experience. So it's not only great to see Vaughn again in any capacity, but great to see him in a role so specific to tie in the larger Star Trek universe. And finally, Alice Krieg appears here as the Borg Queen. Now, of course, we mentioned Alice when she originated the role for the feature film Star Trek First Contact. Later, when Voyager reintroduced the role, Susanna Thompson was hired when Alice was not available. Likewise, Susanna was not available for this episode, and Alice stepped in, though with a very short window of availability. Her scenes were done in 2 days only. It is worth noting that just as Susanna was playing a different Borg Queen than Alice, here Alice is specifically performing as a Borg Queen who is not Susanna's interpretation as well.
Welcome to the shallow end of the Delta Quadrant. Next stop, the Alpha Quadrant. Please note, this is the last stop for gas or a pecan log for 4,000 light years.
Prologue. Fireworks explode over the Golden Gate Bridge as Voyager flies by. A newscaster tells us what we're seeing. The return home 10 years ago, after Voyager was lost in the Delta Quadrant for a full 23 years. A now gray-haired Janeway picks up a coffee cup, stops the newscast while looking contemplatively out over the bay. Act 1. The year is 2404, and we open on a reunion. The former crew of Voyager gathered in Admiral Janeway's San Francisco apartment. There's Captain Harry Kim, a little grayer but no less earnest. A lot of familiar faces here, including Naomi Wildman's young daughter, resembling her mother down to her forehead spikes. Janeway and Kim take a quiet moment together, reminiscing and toasting their hard-won survival. She mentions that Tuvok isn't doing well. Kim plans to visit him soon. He apologizes for missing a recent funeral, but Janeway assures him he was where he needed to be. The Doctor arrives, now with a name, Joe, and a human wife in tow. Tom Paris is now a full-time holonovel author, and B'Elanna, the Federation's liaison to Kronos, pulls Janeway aside about a diplomatic favor involving a sketchy Klingon named Koroth. The request seems unusual, and tied to a mysterious mission involving B'Elanna's daughter, Ensign Miral Paris. Barclay, now Commander Barclay, raises a toast to the journey. Janeway adds one more to those who didn't make it home. A few days later, Janeway guest lectures at Starfleet Academy about everyone's least favorite recurring threat, the Borg. When a cadet asks about 7 of 9's role inside Unimatrix Zero, Janeway gets uncomfortable. She'd rather not discuss 7. Class is interrupted by a private message from Miral. She located the thing Janeway asked her to find. It works, and Koroth is ready to hand it over in person. Janeway agrees to the meeting. Janeway then visits Tuvok, older and clearly unwell, surrounded by scribbled notes in a dimly lit room, but he's too deep in his mental decline to recognize her. She leaves behind a photo of the Voyager crew, a quiet reminder of better days, and goes. Next on the list, a visit from the doctor. After a quick checkup, Janeway asks for a specific drug, chronexaline. which helps protect biomatter from tachyon radiation. He's skeptical. She says it's classified. He says, okay, a lot is left unsaid. Barclay sees Janeway off at Starfleet, handing her a pad, a space thermos of tea, and the news that her shuttle is waiting at Oakland Shipyard. She thanks him. She couldn't have done this without him. And then a gravestone. Chakotay, deceased, 2394. Janeway speaks gently to the marker, promising that things are about to change for all of them. Act 2. Back in 2378, Tom Paris gets an urgent wake-up call from B'Elanna. It's time. He bolts out of bed, races to sickbay, and false alarm. Again. The doctor calmly explains that this is common in Klingon pregnancies. Tom suggests inducing labor. B'Elanna suggests yelling. The doctor suggests they both get used to it. Elsewhere, Janeway reviews ship updates with Chakotay, another fake-out from the Parises, and Chell wants to run the mess hall, offering delicacies like plasma leak soup and red alert chili. Chakotay declines lunch with the captain. He has a better offer waiting in Cargo Bay 2, where Seven has set up a private picnic, and these two are now a thing. Meanwhile, Tuvok is teaching Kalto to Icheb with Harry kibitzing. Icheb wins. Tuvok does everything in his power not to have an emotional reaction, and Harry thinks that he's just being a sore loser. But when Tuvok heads to sickbay, we learn something more serious is brewing. His degenerative neurological condition is progressing, affecting his concentration. The doctor adjusts his meds and recommends telling the captain, but Tuvok insists on silence, at least until his work suffers. Seven is in astrometrics playing Kadaskat over subspace with Neelix, who's thriving in his asteroid colony life and casually mentions he's thinking of proposing to Dexa. Talk shifts to Seven's own relationship. Neelix's suggestion of a picnic date apparently worked well, but when Seven's console starts chirping, the game is over. She's detected signs of potential wormholes. Soon after, she briefs the senior staff. There may be hundreds of wormholes in a nearby nebula. Harry lights up like it's Christmas and Ops. If even one of them leads to the Alpha Quadrant, this could be the shortcut they've been waiting for. Janeway orders to set a course. Act 3. In 2404, Tuvok's condition has deteriorated. He's pacing and rattling off star dates like they're secret codes. The doctor, Joe, arrives and realizes Tuvok's lost in the past. Convinced Janeway is still missing after a long-ago abduction. The suggestion to bring her in falls flat. Janeway's gone off the grid. Tuvok, clearly lucid in the worst way, declares she's not coming back. Joe heads straight to Barclay and demands answers. Why did Janeway really want chronexylene? And why did she vanish after all that talk of teaching? Why is Barclay sweating and stammering like it's 2371 again? Joe pushes and Barclay finally breaks. He knows Janeway's plan and is clearly uneasy about being part of it. On some remote Klingon dust ball, Admiral Janeway beams into a cave and meets Miral Paris and a bunch of hostile Klingons. She's come to collect on a favor, a time-bending piece of tech from a Klingon named Korath. But he's decided to change the deal, demanding extra tech in return, like her souped-up new shuttle SC-4. Janeway refuses and is shown the door. Meanwhile, back in 2378, Voyager investigates the wormhole-rich nebula, but instead of a shortcut home, they nearly collide with a Borg cube lurking in the haze. The Queen herself is watching, and for now, she tells the drones to let Voyager pass, but not out of kindness. She'd like to play with things a while, before annihilation. Act 4. Voyager's senior staff debriefs after their close encounter with the Borg. Tuvok says the cube's sensors likely missed them because of the nebula's interference. Harry sees this as an opportunity. Let's go back in and just dodge the collective while looking for wormholes. Seven quickly kills the buzz. She's detected 47 cubes inside. Janeway decides not to press their luck. Harry pushes back, but Janeway's tone says it all. This is not a democracy. Harry later corners Tom in the corridor, pitching a plan to sneak the Delta Flyer through the nebula. Tom wants no part of it. He's got a wife, a kid on the way, and no desire to be Captain Proton anymore. Harry's shocked. Apparently not everyone is still in their mid-20s and looking for trouble. Chakotay stops by Astrometrics to ask Seven to dinner. She jokes about date numbering because nothing says romance like logarithmic indexing, and accepts. Before she meets him, though, she stops by sickbay. Turns out those flutters in her chest aren't just feelings, they're a potential medical emergency. The doctor had once warned her that intense emotions could fry her cortical node. Now she's ready to risk it and have the node removed. The doctor hints he's available if she wants someone to explore those intimate relationships with. She declines. It's not the Chakotay hologram either. It's the real thing. Jump to 2404. Admiral Janeway returns to Klingon crank Korath to finalize their shady time device deal. She agrees to his updated terms, then asks for a repeat just to make sure the device is legit. Once she gets her hands on the chrono deflector, she slaps a transporter tag on it, beams herself and the device out, and triggers a blade of armor around her shuttle. Warp 6, and she is gone. The Klingons give chase, but their weapons bounce off her hull like spitballs on a battleship. Unfortunately, Starfleet isn't amused. The USS Rhode Island appears, captained by none other than Harry Kim. He orders Janeway to lower her shields and prepare to be arrested. Act 5. Admiral Janeway tries to pull rank on Captain Kim, but it's not that kind of party. He already knows about her rogue time travel plan. Barclay cracked and Joe filled in the rest. Janeway convinces him to at least hear her out. On the Rhode Island, she makes her case. The risks are worth it to avoid the future they all lived through. Captain Kim reminds her of a time he wanted to do something equally reckless back in the Delta Quadrant. She said no. Now she wishes she hadn't. Tables turn. Kim is left weighing his loyalty to Starfleet against his loyalty to his former crew. Back in 2378, Seven beams into Chakotay's quarters with flowers and a post-op emotional range. She breaks the ice immediately with a kiss, followed immediately by another one. Their romantic moment is cut short by a call to the bridge. There's a temporal anomaly on sensors, a classic Captain You'd Better See This scenario. Tuvok detects tachyon emissions, and the crew tries to figure out who or what is knocking on their space-time. In 2404, Admiral Janeway returns to her shuttle to fire up the chrono deflector. Captain Kim helps her install the tech, warning that there's no coming back once it burns out. She's fine with that. Klingon warships drop in just as she's about to activate the device. The ablative armor's offline, and things get spicy. Janeway calls for help. Kim swings the Rhode Island around and gives the Klingon something to chew on while she opens the rift and dives in. In 2378, Voyager sees the rift open and then sees a very familiar face on comms. Older, grayer, and already giving orders. Captain Janeway doesn't love the attitude, but Admiral Janeway doesn't care. She needs Voyager to close the rift now, and then they'll talk. She's there to take Voyager home. Meanwhile, at Borg HQ, the Queen watches this development with that half-smirk that usually precedes very bad things. Act 6. Admiral Janeway beams aboard Voyager, where her younger self greets her like she's seeing a ghost. The two Janeways retreat to the ready room for some awkward coffee chat, tea for future Janeway. She quit the hard stuff years ago. The Admiral gently nudges her younger self toward re-entering the Borg-infested nebula, promising that it is the way home. She doesn't want to say too much, but hints that the journey ahead, 16 more years in the Delta Quadrant, will come at a high cost. The captain isn't convinced, so the Admiral offers up her shuttle for inspection and volunteers for a medical scan to prove that she is who she says she is. In sickbay, the doctor confirms that, yes, this is indeed Catherine Janeway, just older, wiser, and wired with future tech that he apparently hasn't invented yet. While he tries and fails to get spoilers on his future accolades, Seven enters and is greeted by the Admiral with an emotional warmth that makes everyone uncomfortable. Seven confirms the future shuttle's tech is real. Its stealth won't work on Voyager, but the armor and weapons might. Captain Janeway orders the upgrades. As the crew gets to work, Seven slips away to regenerate, but instead of a peaceful recharge, she's yanked into a neural encounter with the Borg Queen, who's now aware of Admiral Janeway's arrival and is not feeling generous. She warns Seven to steer Voyager away from the nebula, or face assimilation. Seven refuses, insisting Voyager just wants to go home, but the Queen plays rough, sending a surge through Seven's cortical node before severing the link. Seven wakes up in her alcove and immediately collapses. Act 7. Seven recovers in sickbay, and both Janeways are there for the update. She reports the Borg Queen made it perfectly clear Voyager turns back or gets assimilated. Captain Janeway is understandably suspicious. Why the heavy protection around this one nebula? Admiral Janeway brushes it off, confident that with her shuttle's future tech, the collective won't stand a chance. Captain Janeway, uneasy but still playing along, orders a red alert and constant scans as they get underway. In astrometrics, Chakotay checks in with Seven. No cubes detected so far, and their chat turns to lighter things, like what life might look like once they're back in the Alpha Quadrant. They don't have answers, but it sounds like some of their time will be spent together. Meanwhile, Tom and B'Elanna have a similar conversation in engineering. Between baby updates and future tech upgrades, there's real excitement about going home this time, even if Voyager does feel like home. Voyager heads back into the nebula, now protected with a blade of armor. One Borg cube appears and opens fire. Barely a scratch. Then two more. Armor integrity drops, but Voyager holds. Tuvok fires transphasic torpedoes, and just like that, two cubes blowed up real good. The Queen, rattled, calls off the rest. As the ship pushes deeper, they spotted a massive transwarp hub orbiting a dying star, veiled in a lattice of Borg architecture. Captain Janeway's eyes narrow. This is what they've been led into? A shortcut home, sure, but through the heart of the collective. Admiral Janeway tries to press forward, but the captain has had enough. Rank or not, this is her bridge, and Voyager is turning around. Tom takes them out of the nebula, leaving Admiral Janeway to stew in silence. Act 8. Back in astrometrics, the senior staff and Admiral Janeway analyze the transwarp hub. It's a gateway to thousands of conduits spread across the galaxy, giving the Borg near instant access to every quadrant. Tuvok calls it their greatest tactical advantage. Naturally, Captain Janeway asks, but how do we blow it up? Seven suggests taking it out from the other side. Use the hub to get home, then launch a strike. But Admiral Janeway finally loses her patience. That won't work, she says, because the Queen will see it coming and adapt. The longer they wait, the more time the Borg have to reverse engineer Voyager's shiny new weapons. Time is running out, and Admiral Janeway wants her younger self to take the exit while they can. But Captain Janeway isn't convinced, and after a hallway throwdown, we find out why the Admiral's pushing so hard. She reveals that if Voyager stays on its original course, Seven will die on an away mission in 3 years, dying in Chakotay's arms, no less. And he's never the same. Also, 22 other crew members won't survive the journey, and Tuvok, he's battling a degenerative disease right now, but the cure is in the Alpha Quadrant. The emotional calculus hits hard. Janeway confronts Tuvok in her ready room. He confirms that there's a treatment, but only if they reach a compatible Vulcan for a mind meld in time. Still, he insists his logic is clear when it comes to their mission. In a refrain we all know, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Elsewhere, Admiral Janeway makes a personal appeal to Seven. She tells her everything, her death, Chakotay's grief, and pleads with her to reconsider the captain's plan. But Seven won't budge. Whatever her past crimes as a Borg drone, she believes a future sacrifice is worth it. In the final briefing room showdown, Seven and Tuvok lay out a plan. Enter the hub, fire spread of transphasic torpedoes into the conduits, and collapse the whole network. They'd have 10 seconds to escape. Captain Janeway turns to her crew, not as their commander, but as family, and opens the floor. If anyone objects, they won't go through with it. Harry is the first to speak. The man who spent years chasing wormholes and shortcuts admits, maybe it's not just about getting home, maybe it's about how they get there. Tom raises his coffee cup. To the journey. Everyone joins, except for the Admiral, who watches with a mix of skepticism and pride. Act 9. The Janeways share coffee in the mess hall. Admiral Janeway, softened by the crew's camaraderie, admits that she was wrong to lie about the transwarp hub, but she's ready to help destroy it. And maybe, just maybe, there's a version of the plan that lets them blow it up and get home. It's high risk, but Admiral Janeway is ready to try it anyway. Later, in her future shuttle's cockpit, Admiral Janeway preps for departure. Her younger self arrives with a hypospray and a goodbye. Shuttle SC-4 launches and vanishes into the nebula and through the Borg hub. Meanwhile, Chakotay finds Seven in astrometrics, and she's gone cold. She's suddenly redefining the parameters of their relationship, citing the emotional risks if one of them were to die. It's a classic self-sacrificial breakup, clearly motivated by what Admiral Janeway told her. Chakotay insists that the future isn't written, and what matters is this moment, these feelings. He reaches for her, she takes his hand. They stand together in the quiet. Down in sickbay, this time, it's the real deal. B'Elanna's in labor, she's shouting, the doctor is flustered, Tom is pacing. When Janeway calls him to the bridge, B'Elanna insists that he go. There's a baby coming, but also a ship to fly. He kisses her, promises to be quick, and bolts. And in the Borg Unicomplex, the Queen has her own surprise visitor, Admiral Janeway. The Queen tries to assimilate her, but no dice. This is just a synaptic interface. Admiral Janeway isn't physically there, just a mental projection. And she's here to make a deal. She'll hand over the shield and weapon specs if the Queen agrees to let Voyager go, towed back to the Alpha Quadrant. The Queen smirks, but Janeway is just getting started. Act 10. In the Queen's chamber, Admiral Janeway proposes a trade, Voyager's fancy new shield and weapon specs in exchange for safe passage home. The Queen wants more, the Admiral's SC-4 shuttle and its database. Janeway balks, warning of future-altering consequences, but ultimately agrees, with a catch: the trade happens after Voyager makes it back. But the Queen is already ahead of her. While they've been chatting, her drones have traced Janeway's signal. The shuttle is yanked out of stealth, and a moment later, Admiral Janeway finds herself in the Queen's chamber for real, and most definitely about to be assimilated. Nanoprobes enter, Janeway drops. Game over, man. Well, hold on. Voyager, meanwhile, is tearing through the transwarp conduit. On the Queen's end, things suddenly get glitchy. The hive mind's voice is replaced by static and screaming. Implants fail, explosions all around. Must be something you assimilated, Admiral Janeway quips. That's when the Queen realizes Janeway infected the collective with a neurolytic pathogen. The entire unicomplex is unraveling, and the Queen is falling apart. Oh, quite literally, limbs dropping off, the whole thing. Her last desperate move, sending a Borg sphere to hunt down Voyager. Then she dies, alone and disconnected, while the unicomplex blows up real good. Voyager takes heavy fire as the sphere catches up and opens its aperture, ready to tractor in the starship. Back in the Alpha Quadrant, Starfleet is preparing for the worst. A transwarp conduit opens less than a light year from Earth. Admiral Paris scrambles a fleet of 27 ships. A single Borg sphere emerges. The fleet opens fire. No damage. Inside the sphere, Janeway gives the order, and Tuvok fires a transphasic photon torpedo. The sphere explodes from the inside, and out of the fire and wreckage, Voyager sails through. They're home. Starfleet hails them. Janeway quietly says, "Sorry for the surprise, but that particular reunion will have to wait." The doctor checks in from sickbay, and there's a new arrival. Tom Paris has a daughter. He dashes off to meet her. Chakotay takes the helm. Captain Janeway takes her chair and gives the order. Set a course for home. The end.
So that was a Herculean effort, because not only did you condense one, but you've condensed 1.5 scripts. Usually we would have our normal Bond Moneypenny repartee, but M really wants us to get into the dossier here. So
got to get right to it. Yeah. Look, there's something I love about Starfleet officers who live on Earth, and particularly in San Francisco. They all have great apartments. Janeway, in particular here, great space.
So I thought the 10-year flashback sequence on the news was a very, very smart and economical way to set the tone and the time.
Yeah, very smart. And another nice little touch, that banged up coffee cup. Like, that's fun. Of course she's got that.
Well, I've actually said this a couple times about the season 7 cold opens, and I like how they set up almost like the foreshadowing of what's going to happen with the story, because a banged up, dented up coffee cup is Janeway.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
In every possible way, it's kind of like her metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I dug that. I have no transition about metaphors when it comes to the future Starfleet uniforms, which I am not a fan.
Yeah. Those go back to TNG.
They go back to what bad ideas, but they go back to.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Was it Robert Blackman? I don't want to diss on Robert Blackman, but.
No, look, everybody, look, if you're going to have a best design, that means you will also, by definition, have a worse design.
Yeah, it kind of like made the Delta Flyer racing uniform look like Armani to me.
Ooh. Whoa. Strong words, Mr. Wow.
Again.
Yeah. Now, after we see older Janeway, now we meet older Harry, and that's really our first look at the cast in old age makeup, meant to be 26 years after we left off with season 7. We already saw old age or older age Harry in Timeless. This is a little different take on that. So you got to wonder, what has this guy been through? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And it's funny because Garrett's sort of doing the older man voice. But you go he's just in his early 50s.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm wondering if anyone actually knows that, Asians, basically we age in half the speed of normal people. So,
I'm lucky. How do I get those genes?
I'm 94 years old. So,
Right.
Yeah, Captain Harry Kim, I dug it, but that it hurts so much that this is an alternate reality.
I know. Yeah, that's, I agree.
Actually, I'm sorry. Hold on. It's not an alternate reality. It's where we go turns it into an alternate reality.
Yeah, this is reality. All right, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But with the cameos, it's fun. I like having Naomi's daughter. That was clever. But come on, what a perfect opportunity to bring back the actor who played older Naomi Wildman in Shattered. Yeah. That would have been great. Yeah. That would have been awesome, Yeah. Also, okay, fun bit. Finally, the Doctor has a name. It's Joe. And this is his human wife, who he married, marrying a hologram. Interesting. That is going to be very difficult. But definitely the Doctor has a type.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think you and I both have that same note. He's got a type.
Yeah.
That one's friend zone him. That's the
right. That is all he needs, right? All right, now hang on, Admiral Janeway. You are the guest lecturer at a class about the Borg, and you don't want to discuss 7 of 9. You knew this was coming,
right?
Okay, you knew that has to be part of the curriculum. I'm sorry,
right? They're looking through their books. I'm like, why is chapter 7 of the 9 chapters missing?
Why is it gone? Right? Yeah. Man, it is rough to see Tuvok in the condition that he's in.
Yeah.
But Tim, oh my God, does he play him so well?
Yep.
Yes.
Sublime, no notes.
Yeah. Incredible. When we see Chakotay's gravestone, it says that he was born in 2329. So in the latter half of season 7, that makes him 49. Does that seem about right to you? So in season 1, he would have about 42.
Yeah. Right? So, yeah, I mean, he looked up about that age before they, darkened his hair. So it actually makes more sense when they didn't.
Yeah. It was great. The salt and pepper. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What was carved on Chakotay's headstone? Was it the alien people's tattoo?
Ooh, from way back when?
Yeah, from actually the episode tattoo.
That would have been a really nice detail if they did that. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was it. It certainly wasn't his actual facial tattoo. B'Elanna's false pregnancy alarm. She yells, "I want this thing out of me now. These things are baby, right?
Yeah,
I wanted to
she's
say-
Milana.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, that's fun. I really wish we saw Chell, but I love the menu ideas. Like, I want a whole restaurant with clever puns like that.
I'm just saying that if a Star Trek convention doesn't have, like a restaurant doesn't have that specific menu,
Mm-hmm.
I love chicken warp core Dawn Blue. I thought that was magnificent. Chef's kiss. You really need to make that happen. Someone.
So good. Yeah. And then the romance of a cargo bay picnic. More to come about this particular ship, I'm sure. I really like the Calto bit. That's a good scene. And not only is it just fun to have these characters together, but has so much more weight when you realize that it is the lead-in to Tuvok's condition.
Yeah.
But that was really cleverly done. Nice to see Neelix. Oh my God. What a great way to bring him back into the show. And Seven already is more relaxed and more personal. I kind of wondered about playing her that way before we really reveal her change, you know. But I'm with you, what you said before about getting rid of Neelix too soon.
Yeah.
Right.
I was just, it doesn't make sense to me that they would do Homestead, then Renaissance Man, then this, without Homestead being the lead into Endgame. Just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, yeah. Quick note here about my breakdown for the story. I did actually have to go back to the scripts because depending on how you're watching this, like if you're catching it streaming, these act breaks are actually, they don't have a break. They don't have fade to black. They just go right into another scene. And I actually went back kind of frame by frame and I listened to the music cue, but they bleed right in. So I'm not sure when that particular edit was done, but I did go check, and these act breaks are in kind of weird places, but sure enough, they are scripted exactly as I broke it down. So, kind of strange. I just thought I'd bring that up here at the beginning of Act 3 because that was the most jarring one for me.
So do like all Starfleet buildings at this time, the 24th century, are they just, they're buildings with giant icons on them? With giant names on them, like, you know, here's Starfleet Communications, you know, here's Starfleet Medical, here's Starfleet Culinary, right? A giant, I don't know, like
bit over the top.
Yeah,
it's a bit over the top. But again, you know, Tim is just so good in these scenes. And I tell you who else is really good, Dwight Schultz playing older Barclay getting caught off guard. He's wonderful at that, just bringing back these different shades of who Barclay is. And man, I mentioned it in the trivia, Korath, so cool to see a Star Trek The Experience character canonized here. It's brilliant. I think Morale, seeing the older Morale, is great. Good choice there. I know that this will probably come up elsewhere in the show. I know that the Borg Queen is still controversial. I still really don't mind her, although believe me, I get the criticisms, but you shouldn't have a moment where the drones say, essentially, hey, let's assimilate Voyager, and the Queen says no. Yeah. They all have a hive mind. There isn't I want to do this thing. No, I'm telling you to do something different. No. That doesn't happen.
I thought that maybe the Queen has like the Borg firewall, you know?
Oh, okay.
I have no idea. I mean, I'm just kind of spitballing, you know.
Queen decision required.
Exactly.
Okay.
Queen's level 3, that's for sure. Yeah. Also, it's kind of like the Doctor. Like we always made fun that the Doctor is a hologram and the computer at the same time, but, you know, the computer can't read the Doctor's thoughts. So something like that. I do dig Alice Krieg as the Queen. She has her very own specific way of like the first contact approach to it.
Yeah.
But what doesn't work for me here is the whole aspect of the cadet breaking up Unimatrix Zero and what Janeway specifically did to the Queen in the showdown of Unimatrix Zero, but then having a completely different actor than Susanna Thompson play the Queen.
Right.
Yeah, no, it doesn't connect well.
Yeah, good stuff. We also have what I think is a very necessary, at least as far as character arcs go, a very necessary scene. Tom saying that he is home and he's not into risking himself in the nebula. I thought that played very nicely. It shows a little maturity. He's got to have some of it somewhere.
Yeah.
And, it's a nice way to play it.
At timestamp 30 minutes, 2 seconds, 7 says, my analysis of the tritanium signature suggests there were at least 47 Borg vessels inside the nebula. I'm glad that you brought that up in your recap.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And, oh boy. All right. Chakotay is just laying it on. But now 7 is inquiring about the problem with her cortical node. And now the doctor is like, oh yeah, I figured it out. So how badly would this previous scene have hobbled 7's abilities? Like that's the thing that I don't get here. I mean, it is hooked up to her brain after all, but yeah, there were some kind of odd choices. I like that at least we have a bow on that, and we're saying, oh yeah, this next thing got to happen for 7. I don't love the condensed timeline here. We can get into that as well. But all that said, oh man, Doctor, she's just not that into you.
Yep. There's the neutral zone, and then there's the friend zone. And believe me, encroaching the friend zone, very, very dangerous.
He is deep inside the friend zone for sure. Yeah. I love this. If you were honorable, you wouldn't have changed the terms of our agreement. I love Admiral Janeway calling out Korath like, suck it, Klingon honor, you know? So good. Okay. A lot of very good effects in this episode, but that kind of armor deployment around the SC-4 shuttle, it's very 90s.
Totally.
Because the first time, correct me if I'm wrong, the first time we ever saw that as a film-going, TV-watching audience was 1989's Batman.
Yep.
When the Batmobile did that.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, that worked there-ish because it was new, but
yeah. It's an interesting choice, but I remember seeing like the original Eagle Moss armored Voyager. I'm like, that looks awfully like a Batmobile armored
model. I can't love it. I can't. But what I do love, Harry's got a ship. He's got the Rhode Island. That's awesome. Again, another strange act break that isn't really an act break, but again, going back to the script, that's how it worked out. Brings us into the wrap up for this episode.
So when Janeway gets beamed on board, this Admiral Janeway gets saved, and gets beamed on board. There's like, everyone's like waiting. And then like she beams aboard and the transporter, she's just looking at her iPhone or something. Like, no, it's not even looking up. Like, you're not even going to give this poor girl like a line or a reaction or anything.
I know. Sorry, background player. You are not even allowed to react.
Right.
Yeah. Which leads into one of Harry and Janeway's better scenes together.
Yeah.
That was really nice. Yeah.
I like the point, without making a point, of this, the energy from Timeless kind of like being danced around in that scene, like the repercussions of manipulating time or trying to fix things that you usually don't have the chance of fixing.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Speaking of things that may or may not need fixing, things get steamy in Chakotay's quarters. I swear, though, again, 7 has been more emotional up until now than usual anyway. So I still wonder if that was messing with her cortical node, but whatever. At this point in the show, it's out. Great moments between old and young Janeway. Just, first of all, technically, I think they're done super well. But the bit with the coffee cup, that was such a great visual effects sleight of hand, where young Janeway's got the coffee cup, old Janeway takes it from her. It's slick. You gotta, again, kind of go back and freeze frame.
Right.
Well done.
So I have now 3 of the temporal mechanic examples, that at play here. You either have the Back to the Future temporal mechanics, you either have Time Cop, right? Or you have MCU temporal mechanics. Now, when I see Janeway take the mug from Janeway, I have to be really careful about that, because if time cop mechanics are in play, the same matter can't occupy the same space.
That's right.
Or weird things happen. So I'm thinking that this is more Back to the Future.
Oh, I definitely. Yeah. By the way, Admiral Janeway has this neural link interface with her ship. We learned, and didn't we already learn that is a bad idea to interface with a ship? If you don't believe me, go ask Alice.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome shot on Voyager's exterior hull of workers out there putting all this new tech into place. I thought that was awesome. Yeah, not enough of that. I really like this version of 7, though. She's still a pro. She's still herself. She's just a bit more personal, a bit more relaxed, kind of experimenting into this emotional life. And actually a good moment with Chakotay here that they have, talking about what their lives potentially will be in the Alpha Quadrant, even though I have thoughts about this whole thing, but yeah, whatever.
Put a pin in that.
Put a pin in that. Timestamp 5432. A single shot that goes on for more than a minute in engineering. This conversation between Tom and B'Elanna. Wow. So well done. Hats off to Alan Croker and Marvin Rush, I assume, who shot this. So good. By the way, come on. Why would Admiral Janeway prep them all so well for what they're getting into and then not tell them about the nature of the wormholes inside the nebula? Like, surprise, it's a Borg hub? No, that doesn't make any sense. But
so Admiral Janeway says, if I hadn't developed technology and tactics that could defeat them, I wouldn't be standing here today. But that's the thing, is like, if you have 16 more years, then you develop that. But if you don't, then who's going to be the Janeway that returns home and says this? And Barclay says, this is the Janeway that wrote the book on the Borg. It's not the same person.
Right. Yeah. Well, we're coming back to that. Believe me. All right. But now Janeway just decides to throw out it's a temporal prime directive when it comes to Tuvok's condition. Like, now she says it. Come on.
It's a weird thing when you have, Admiral Janeway saying 7 of 9 is going to die. That is breaking the temporal prime directive. Mm-hmm. But then saying, oh, no, I can't tell you about Tuvok because that will be breaking the temporal prime directive. I'm like, you can't have it in the same scene both ways.
Yeah, no, exactly. Right? Exactly. And look, and what Admiral Janeway does to 7 there is so manipulative. It's really kind of cringy, but also she has this line, I've known you longer than you've known yourself, which is technically true.
Technically true.
Yeah. This Janeway's got 3 more years on her. Yeah. Harry's speech, nice and heartfelt, and he's though talking like it will take ages to carry out this plan inside the nebula. It's dangerous. Yeah, but it was like, no, dude, it's literally just minutes. Like, the journey is just like, go in there, blow stuff up. But
he was embracing his inner Rush fan. Remember, the journey is not to arrive. I'll get to that later.
Right.
I know fans out there didn't like the sudden pairing of Chakotay and 7, but I do think it gives us one of the best morals, meanings, and messages in this episode.
Ooh, I'm looking forward to that because, yes, they do have some nice lines exchanged there. I will agree with you there. So this is Admiral Janeway's bluff. Just have a cube drag Voyager back to the Alpha Quadrant because, hang on, please correct me if I'm wrong. The Queen will, try to assimilate everything on the other side of the wormhole. Like, I'm shocked that they haven't done that already, given that it's there and it's available to them.
So here's the thing, though. So there's that old adage of, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Mm-hmm. When Janeway shows up and arms Voyager, it's not that she was the gun that was brought to the knife fight. She was like Jesse Ventura's Predator helicopter minigun brought to a knife fight.
Very true.
Right? That's the difference here.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah. All right. Look, as we get into the Borg a little bit in our finale here, look, the Borg, they know how to time travel anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we learned that in First Contact. Second of all, doesn't the Queen know that she would be creating a time paradox anyway by giving Voyager safe passage back to the Alpha Quadrant? Like, if she was going to hold up to the deal, which we know that she's not, and that this Admiral Janeway will just fade away like Marty's siblings in a photograph, because that's what would happen.
That's it. Embracing the Back to the Future temporal mechanics. Yes, I was actually
It's the only way to look at this episode.
And I kind of dug that. I wish it wasn't the nanoprobes that was causing her body to like disassemble, but it would be more like Marty not being able to play the guitar.
Yeah,
and watching and looking like straight through his hand, as he fades, from time. So when it comes to the Borg, is there such a thing as unnecessary force? Because the Admiral says use all necessary force. I'm like, so what are you going to do? Like, again, like use foul language or something?
Yeah, right. They're going to hurl insults at them.
Yeah, how dare you?
Yeah.
When Voyager shoots the transphasic torpedo and blows a hole through the ship, the sphere, It's very Star Trek meets Star Wars meets Return of the Jedi meets Lando Calrissian, right?
Yeah. Learn from the best. Okay.
Right.
If this episode has to be one Lando short, then at least you're going to do the tribute.
So you're saying that the episode did Lando?
Yeah. It did. Yeah. I love, the Borg Queen throwing her own arm across the room is great.
I dig that.
That's just a great image. Glad they went with it. What's not great, Baby Morale's makeup. And look, and I fully understand that there are serious limitations in what you can do when you have an infant on set.
Sure.
When it comes to makeup, but it's not great. You do that with CG today and it'll look great.
I tell you what, though, for labor, B'Elanna wasn't really all that pained. Not a misplaced hair or a bead of sweat.
No. She's coming through it like a champ.
A trooper. So there were some really nice kind of like ship references when you saw the reverse shot of Voyager being escorted back to Earth. You saw Galaxy class, a Defiant class, a Nebula class, Prometheus class, and Excelsior class, as far as I can tell.
There's an Akira class in there as well.
Okay.
Yeah. It's good looking stuff. Yep.
So I'm looking at my episode timer when I'm doing these notes, and I'm wondering how they're going to squeeze in all the family reunions that I've been waiting to see in the next something like 20 seconds. Oh, wait a second. It's over. Oh, sadness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, again, big thing to point out in PIN. So technically, what we saw here is an alternate timeline Janeway /Crew /Voyager making it home at the end.
Are they the alternate, though?
We'll get right back to Endgame after a quick word from this week's sponsor.
Norman, the Federation has starships for exploration, star bases for diplomacy, but what do we have to protect our data from prying eyes?
Well, John, that's where Surfshark comes in. If you're like most people, you probably use public Wi-Fi, at a coffee shop or a hotel or at an airport, and that means your online activity could be visible to anyone on that network. But Surfshark routes all your traffic through an encrypted tunnel so no one, not even your ISP, can see what you're doing.
And it's not just about privacy. Surfshark lets you change your virtual location, which means you can access websites, streaming content, and services that might be blocked where you are. Now, that has come in handy for me numerous times on international trips. I was actually just on a trip where I was bouncing between the U.S. and Canada, and I love that, where I could access the content that I wanted. I mean, half the things that I would normally access just weren't there until I fired up a VPN.
Exactly. It's like having your own transporter buffer. Just pick a location, activate it, and suddenly you're online in the UK or Canada or even Ryza. Well, maybe not Ryza.
No. Scratch that one off the list. Plus, Surfshark includes tools like Clean Web, which blocks trackers, malware, and phishing attempts before they even load. And setup is easy. Download the app, log in, flip the switch, you are done.
Go to surfshark.com/Star Trek or use code Star Trek at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. That link and code are also in our show notes.
Stay private, stay secure, and keep your online activity out of the hands of spacefaring ad agencies. Surfshark's got your back.
When the Borg Queen loses her temper, it's quite surprising. Some might even say, disarming. When she throws hands at you, she really throws hands at you.
I don't know, Norman. Are we bound by the temporal prime directive from picking this apart?
I don't know.
I'm glad that you said this early on, though, that we have to treat this with Back to the Future rules, kind of. Does an actual timeline get wiped away at a certain point? Or because we're just entering an alternate stream, but when we do that, the other one goes away? Because Star Trek is tried to have it both ways, where it's like, oh, no, these things just continue to exist out there, all these different threads. We'll come back to that potentially as we discuss what's going on temporally. But
what we need, though, John, before we do that, is we need a giant chalkboard.
Yeah.
And a timeline to actually write, like, okay, this is what happens. This is the deviation point, the temporal shift, and this is the new timeline.
Yeah, okay, so we do, but okay, I'm just going to go back to my biggest problem with the way this whole thing works. As you're sketching this out on your mental chalkboard, any of you at home who have a chalkboard, you want to get this out and play with it. If future Janeway, if 2404 Janeway changed the timeline so that Voyager got home early, and these other events never occur, like Seven dying, like Tuvok losing his mind, like Janeway battling the Borg for an extra 16 years out there. Doesn't that also mean that Janeway wouldn't be able to hatch a plan to go back and help her younger self with all of that fancy new Borg fighting tech?
Well, that goes into now MCU time or temporal mechanics.
To say that she would be able to do that or would not be able to do that?
She would be able to do that and affect basically a new timeline, because that's basically saying that, okay, Captain America, after everything with Thanos, spoilers who haven't seen Endgame, but then you put the time stone back into where you removed it from time, but the stream is still the same. Also, you can't resurrect Black Widow. Well, of course you could, because you'd be able to rewrite time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because, because the Borg Queen actually says in this episode, she says it to Admiral Janeway, Captain Janeway is about to die. If she has no future, you will never exist, and nothing you have done here today will happen. But that's not right, because the Admiral Janeway she's talking to is from a different timeline at that point, right?
I don't think so.
No? Okay. All right. So same timeline, but, well, no, hang on. Oh man, we're going to stretch our brains into taffy trying to.
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I think that we would encourage everybody in their best interests to either join us at After Dark or sign up patreon.com/missionlog and join us on After Dark and show us your diagrams.
Okay, maybe that's the time to figure that part out, because you have to have a Janeway who did not go through the portal in order to have a Janeway who makes it back to Earth in 13 years or 16, I kind of forget, who takes that long, and then another 10 years once they're back at home to figure all of this out.
Yeah, I mean, it's either you believe in the temporal loop mechanic or a linear mechanic. And the thing is that Back to the Future does it best because they wrote it better.
Yeah.
Honestly.
That's true. That's true. All right. What else? What else should we hit?
Aside from all of that, which is basically just having fun with the conversation of temporal mechanics, here's the bigger ethical question.
Yeah.
If you have the ability to be able to rewrite time, do you have the ability or do you have the right to actually do that? Right? Because you wanting to change the course of history is probably the biggest ego flex in the history of ego flexes.
Why not go back to Caretaker?
Exactly.
Why, and also kill baby Hitler along the way.
All of that, right?
Yeah.
Because okay, so if Endgame's about anything, right, it's basically, and I'm going to lay it all on Janeway because this is really about her. She waits all of this time for the conditions to be right to time travel. She knows all of the technology to beat the Borg. She uses everything that she's learned about either losing crew members or the ship being destroyed in the past 16 years plus 10 to be able to do this. That entire time, she is bent on revenge. Right? And then she was able to do it, sacrificing herself, knowing that if I die, I can create the timeline that I want, that we should have had. But what happens to all the people that were positively affected?
See?
Timeline. Like Captain Harry Kim.
Yeah.
Will never be captain now.
Commander Barclay.
Exactly. And all of the people that learn all of the technology, all of the advancement, studied all the logs. Yes, several crew members and people that were very personal to her, yes, they died. Or Tuvok is, he's undergoing, this neurological, decline.
Mm-hmm.
But that's life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Things happen that are terrible, but we don't have the ability to time travel and make things the way we want them to be.
And remember the illogic of Admiral Janeway's plan to begin with, which is show up, take Voyager into the nebula, say, no, you really need to do this. Now you need to get back to the Alpha Quadrant through a wormhole. The wrench in the works is Captain Janeway saying, oh, no, boy, we're going to blow it up too. And Admiral Janeway's, you can't do that. That's too risky. That's crazy. Why would you do that? Admiral Janeway is not the one who went through that hub to begin with. She's the one who slogged it out the hard way, right? So now you have this opportunity, but why are you forgetting that the Borg will absolutely follow Voyager? And you're opening up an assimilation frenzy. There's your album name. On the other side. Yeah, you're welcome. Mm-hmm. You're opening up an assimilation frenzy on the other side. So in a way, Captain Janeway's plan is literally the only way to do this with any sort of protection, any sort of ethical sense for those who are around her. Because, think about it. It's either go home the hard way, stay away from the nebula, okay? And maybe learn a little bit from Admiral Janeway, which, by the way, now you got a stowaway. Now you have Admiral Janeway always hanging out on board, always just, poking her head in to make fun of Captain Janeway's decisions,
Mm-hmm.
Or you just try to go through the nebula as fast as you can, find the right portal, get home. Then what? The Borg follow you, of course, and they assimilate everything that's within a light year of Earth. Yeah, that of course it's going to happen. Or you go through the nebula and you blow up the portal. That's it. Now, I think there is another shaky ethical thing here, which is it is one thing to go through and destroy the tech, which is what Tuvok is able to do, use the transphasic photon torpedoes, crush the portal from the inside, hope that you escape on the other end. That is a worthy risk, okay? What is not maybe an ethical worthy risk is Admiral Janeway with a neurotoxin that kills every Borg in...
At least in that hub, for sure.
How big... Yeah. And I would think that if it is spread by the hive mind, then potentially, is she pulling a Jean-Luc Picard here? Is she pulling... Which, again, Jean-Luc Picard got walked back from that edge. He did not commit genocide. But is that what's happening here? We watch it blow up real good, and we're like, okay, fine. Did we just witness the genocide of the Borg?
Well, here's the one thing about time travel. Like, when you put it in the hands of one person, or at least when one person believes that they have the ability or the right to be able to do that, then it's not about an act of compassion trying to save people. It's about, I have the ability, I have the power, and the oversight to control the events of time itself.
Yeah.
And don't you think isn't that antithetical to what Star Trek is about?
Well, I think we learned that in the showdown between Anorax and Janeway.
Right.
We saw one side and the other side. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Very clear cut.
Very clear cut. And that's he wanted to recreate time so that the situation, the conditions revealed themselves, that he could save his wife, he could save his people, et cetera, et cetera. And if there's one event that's out of the time stream, that's beyond his control, or some type of mutation in the time stream, then everything changes, right? And then you have to restart it all over. You can't cheat death. You can't cheat death, and you can't cheat others out of the growth from that pain. That's not up to you. You be out there like Janeway, right? Because, Janeway said to Admiral Janeway said to Captain Janeway, 7 years ago, you put the lives of strangers ahead of the lives of your crew. You can't make the same mistake again. Captain Janeway did what she believed was right by Federation standards.
Yeah.
The Federation Code of Honor, ethics.
Yeah.
So Janeway said, I did what was right. But how are we reconciling now what happened to Janeway? Did she lose so many people and lose her way so badly that she's like, you know what? I'm just too old. I'm too embittered. I'm too cynical. I don't believe in the Federation's code of conduct anymore, or ethics, or temporal mechanics, or any of that. I just want it to be the way it used to be.
Yeah.
Right.
But that sounds like a personal problem then.
It is.
You know?
But how many people are changed because she doesn't like the way things ended? But isn't it the whole point of being a captain? Aren't you supposed to actually learn from that and pass that knowledge on to others so that you as a captain or a leader may not make the same mistake that somebody else did? These weren't mistakes either. They were just bad circumstances. But you can't save people from bad circumstances. They just happen. Right?
Yeah. I mean, look, Admiral Janeway could have just as easily come to Captain Janeway and said, you know, only a few weeks ago, you lost Lieutenant Joe Carey.
Right.
You know, you could avoid that. We start all this over again. And Captain Janeway was, hey, well, it was his time. that one I'm okay with.
And that's the tough thing about seeing something like this, because, okay, so when do you start cherry picking who means what to whom?
Exactly.
You know, there's this thing, I wanted to read this because I wanted to kind of frame this in the sort of philosophy that I've been studying. So,
yeah.
So in order to fix the past, Admiral Janeway just doesn't cheat death. She cheats her younger self, her younger crew, their ability to grow through struggle, right? Every hardship that Voyager endured, from Caretaker to the Hirogen to the Borg to Species 8472, right? It defines who they are. So when you erase all of that part of the journey, that's 16 years, right? It erases their ability to learn from that, right? To learn from adversity, to grow.
Yeah.
So Marcus Aurelius said, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. That's memento mori.
Yeah.
That's what I love about the scene with Chakotay and Seven. Chakotay says, there's no guarantee any relationship involves risk, because that's why life is worth living, right? You make the risk for today because there's no tomorrow.
Right. Right.
So unless there is a way to time travel and manipulate that, you have to live life the way you're supposed to live life right now. Kirk, he could have time traveled to save Spock. He didn't. You know, he saved the Earth. But he could have all the way, learning that he could have saved Spock and stopped all that stuff.
Yeah,
right? So how far back do you say, like, okay, I have the ability to rewrite time. Let's do that. Let's just rewrite everything. Like you said, go back to Caretaker, go back to all before that. But the captains know that. They know that you can't cheat death. You have to learn from it. You have to accept it. You can't pat yourself on the shoulder or on the back for your ingenuity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, I agree totally. I do want to come back to that a little bit about the Chakotay 7 thing, because I feel like we need to address it a little bit before we wrap up this segment. It's a strange choice. Now, I do think that scene is wonderful. And I think the heart of that scene is wonderful. And I like the inspiration here to let Seven be a little more human, because it at least shows that there is more of her to come, even if it's just your headcanon. You know, forget what you may get in Star Trek 20 years later, but just in terms of your headcanon, who she will become, right? But what do you make of the choice to have her and Chakotay? And I will preface it by saying that I think the biggest mistake, the biggest drop ball in all of this is that we only planted that seed a couple of weeks ago. And even then, that was holodeck Chakotay. So then you only really have a mild flirtation once after that. And now we fast forward to this. So I don't hate the idea of exploring a romantic relationship with important characters on the show. But I think, first of all, there is the difficulty with it being Chakotay. And second of all, there is a difficulty with it being right at the end of the series.
Well, it was totally unearned. I mean, I will completely admit that. But at the same time, though, and it's also, you're trying to create this catharsis, that doesn't exist because you're forcing these two characters to be with each other in the past and have this issue with, one of the reasons why Janeway had to go back into the past, or Admiral Janeway, so that she could right this wrong, or whatever she thinks this is. And it's really, really, really strange because there's almost kind of like, and maybe this is just an undercurrent that I was sensing. There's almost this kind of like jealousy that Admiral Janeway had about Chakotay's and Seven's relationship.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Now, I'm not saying that she did anything to sabotage it, but I do believe that she was embittered by it. Like all of these things that happened. I'm going to get roasted for saying this. All the things that happened that Janeway is trying to correct, Admiral Janeway is trying to correct, is because she didn't like the way her life turned out.
Yeah. Yep.
And you know what?
Yep.
Too bad. That's not how it works. And you're a captain, you're an admiral. You have seen how things don't work out. And you know what? You grow from that. You learn from that. That's what gives you character.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads me into like one of the last things I wanted to talk about. There's this thing that I observed about the two Janeways, quote unquote. You have the idealist versus this embittered, disillusioned Admiral Janeway.
Yeah.
And they admit this, like in the show, Admiral Janeway says to Captain Janeway, I used to be more idealistic. Captain Janeway said, I did what I knew was right. Now, I'm not saying that these things are mutually exclusive, but okay, let's take a look at, and we always put like the captains up on this pedestal. That's why it's very important to get the right people to play these right roles.
Oh, yeah.
It's very, very like pivotal to a series. And I'm not saying that the choice of bringing Kate Mulgrew to play Captain Janeway was anything other than inspired, because it was. It's just, okay, what did Janeway really suffer to turn her away from Starfleet's idealisms, right? Because Kirk never did. Picard, obviously, up to this point, never did.
Yeah.
Cisco, we don't know. He's playing God somewhere, and then this, and then, there's obviously a different, pathway for Archer. But what happened to her? Because the entire series, 7 years of this is what we think Starfleet should do. This is what we think we would be able to achieve in the Delta Quadrant for Starfleet. What happened?
Yeah.
That seems to me there was a huge disconnect with these two versions of Janeway they're not really separated by that much time, but a complete mental and spiritual shift of your ethics.
I was about to say, it kind of makes you wonder the state of mental health support at Starfleet on Earth for somebody who has come back from a 20 plus year voyage and has had 10 more years to sit and contemplate and live that loss over and over and over in her mind.
So it's kind of like, here's the big question. We can leave this to the audience. Mm-hmm. Which Janeway represents Starfleet's future? The captain who accepts consequence, or the admiral who refuses to live with it? So that's something that I really had a difficult time trying to reconcile with. Okay, if you live long enough and if you see things happen and endure certain things for a long enough time, can it really shift like your ethical and moral core?
Norman, are you saying you either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain?
I'm glad we finally tied off the Borg storyline and can rest assured that any future Borg-related stories will be consistent with this. Oh wait, now I'm in an alternate future.
So we are at the end of Endgame. The game is afoot now. Or is the game an arm? It really depends on what the Borg Queen throws at us, right? Wow, it is the end of Voyager, the final episode of the final season, and we are here to do what we always do. We are not going to shirk our duties. This is what we do. We look at the episode, we see, did this episode hold up? Does it stand the test of time? And did we find any morals, meanings, or messages contained in this episode? A long episode, lots to chew on. The discussion was robust. I can't wait to hear the conversations or hear the emails or read all about it. But for right here and now, this is where we are. And John Champion is going to bring us home.
Well, look, first of all, I think it's going to be important and also satisfying to come back and look at Voyager as a whole in a few weeks to really put the series in perspective. But you know, here on this show, what we do is we look at an episode by episode breakdown, and only then can we look back retroactively and say, oh, okay, these things built up to tell us this story. But in this episode in particular, I'm honestly having a bit of a struggle with it, because I remember when I first saw it being really excited and kind of blown away. Like, they did this feature-length epic thing, tried to tell a big story, and you got time travel, and you got the Borg, and you have some satisfying action scenes, you have satisfying emotional scenes. They really were just trying to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. But now, having watched it again and having watched it several times for our purposes here, I have come away with a different opinion of it. I think one of the greatest problems of this episode is that it tries to make the uncomplicated much more complicated than it is. I would rather have slowed down a bit, spent more time with our characters, instead of trying to show off to the audience a bit like, well, if you change this thing, then this other thing will happen. And who's telling the truth? Maybe Admiral Janeway's got a trick up her sleeve. And what happened to Voyager? Where's it going to show up again? That gets really messy here. And honestly, for as many great technical choices as are made in this episode, like, again, going back to that tracking shot in engineering for over a minute, bravo, chef's kiss. But I think the editing in Act 10, so Act 5 of Part 2, I think it's kind of a mess. There's so much back and forth between Voyager interior and exteriors. There's the Borg sphere. It's catching up. Here's the Alpha Quadrant on the other side. I know what they were going for. I know they're trying to build the tension and create a little bit of mystery there, but it just is messy in a way that it doesn't need to be messy. And that's too bad, because you immediately just slam the brakes and end the episode right after that, which is another of this episode's sins. So what works here? Yeah, you got great effects. You have a great epic scope. Of course, all of those things exist. But maybe when it comes to a finale, Star Trek needs to focus a little more on what is human and not what is epic, especially in an overarching story like this, where you're in a couple of different time frames and you're trying to tell multiple character stories and you're trying to tell the action story that kind of underpins the whole thing. I think the greatest problem that I have with this episode is that we spend so much time on Earth after Voyager returns with a version of the Voyager crew who are essentially living in a different timeline once the timeline gets changed. So where is our emotional investment supposed to be exactly? So you can really ignore all of that stuff, because in the end it has no consequence, right? So if we need to come away with the idea that Janeway is driven and determined, well, look, I already got that in the last 6 seasons and 24 episodes. So when the real crew, when the new crew, newly refreshed, newly saved, newly transported, what should we call them? When they get back home early and it's now the end, I don't have the satisfaction of seeing them back home in the quote unquote correct timeline. And that is a huge disservice. So, yeah, it's another one of those episodes where I can give you the reasons that it holds up. I can say it is well produced. I can say that there are great performances. I can say that there are great scenes. But does it really hold up as an example of what Star Trek does well and with a powerful enough moral meaning message? Well, I'm going to get to that in a second. But unfortunately, no. Can I enjoy this episode again? Probably. but does it really truly work? I don't think it does. How about you, Norman?
Yeah, I know this is going to be difficult for Voyager fans to hear, but no, it doesn't hold up. Now, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I know I've spent a lot of time trying to organize my thoughts here because it is the last episode of Voyager. And, for Mission Log, we have a very specific standard, that we hold all of these episodes to, when it comes to the story, when it comes to consequence, when it comes to the moral or meaning or message, the emotional lesson that's left behind. And I think my biggest issue with this episode is that it is, for the finale, is anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Right? It just felt rushed. The pacing was really haphazard.
Yeah.
And I think also because, and I said this before, starting with Homestead, going into Renaissance Man, and now Endgame, I think that ordering it that way, these last three episodes, I think it really kind of harmed the momentum of going into Endgame after giving such an emotional goodbye to Neelix. I think that just really, having that pause and not even remembering that Neelix was gone, or, referencing that in Renaissance Man, it just makes everything else after that just kind of like seem inconsequential, like you said. So what did I learn from this episode? Just in terms of an episode of I would rewatch? Not really. I mean, there's nothing really there for me to rewatch. There were no lasting emotional stakes because, like you said, the story undercuts itself with time travel. And if you can time travel as easily as he snaps his fingers. Now, look, I know that you're people out there saying, well, it took 16 years plus 10 for Janeway to be able to get to that point. But when you get to that point, you can snap your fingers. It's not a matter of how much time it took.
Right.
It matters. What matters is that you can do it once the time you needed to invest brings you to that moment where you can just push a button and change all of that time. There's no satisfying end to that. You need that emotional catharsis. You need joy and pain, right? We need to know what happened with his crew and that what they went through mattered, right? Because once you turn yourself into a godlike being like the Borg or like Q or like any of these issues that we've had with these godlike beings, and we turn our main character into something like that, that loses the plot. That just loses the audience and you know what? That's not what I want Star Trek to be, because you want to grow with the characters that you've invested all this time with. And that's what I can't put on paper. I can't put on paper, yeah, this is exactly what I wanted from the 7 years that I've spent watching this show with these characters. Now, I know that I have a personal issue with not bringing Susanna Thompson back for the Borg Queen, because that would have been a really good capstone, for this narrative.
Sure.
But if this thing with this almighty reset button, that's kind of a meme, but it really is the crutch of crutches for this series, man. It's like, I understand that it's not all about serialization. It's not about being able to have this type of anthology type of show. But at the same time, when you can just basically say, hey, you know what? We don't like the way this is going. We can't put scars on Voyager. We can't put scars on the crew. We can't put scars in their mental state. We can't put scars in their physical state. So when you go through all of these trials and tribulations, if you will, and there are no scars or emotional consequences or lingering effects, why do we care?
Yeah.
You want that to happen because those scars come with you as the viewer. If you're going to undo time, why go halfway? Go all the way back to the Badlands. When Janeway was chasing the Valjean with Voyager, and then just start from there and say, don't go in there because there's going to be a beam that takes you to 7 years worth of tragedy and trauma.
Right.
Go there, because if you're going to play God, play God. For me, it wasn't very good just because I don't care. And this is a double negative, but I'm going to say it anyway. I don't not want to care about Star Trek. I want to care about Star Trek.
Of course.
And that's where I kind of, but it's very unsatisfying Very unsatisfying. Like, it's like you want to sit down to like that great meal and all of a sudden you're like, that was not, that juice was not worth the squeeze. But maybe the morals, meanings, and messages will be. I don't know.
Well, I hate to disappoint, or maybe not disappoint, and kind of be aligned with what you're saying here about time travel, because I do think there are other morals, meanings, and messages here on a personal level that can be explored, but I decided to go with the choice of time travel as our tool here to frame my moral meaning message. And we ask ourselves, in our show notes, it's always phrased as, what's the message? And I said to myself that there's a problem even asking that question for an episode like this one. Because we're okay with the fact that, look, not every episode of Star Trek needs to come with a moral meaning or message. The vast majority of them do, but sometimes, like, say, a piece of the action, you just want some popcorn and permission to turn off your critical thinking skills, right? That's okay. That's fine. We all like to do that from time to time. When it comes to Voyager as a whole, there may be some larger themes worth unpacking. And again, don't worry, we'll get to that because we will do follow-up, wrap-up episodes with guests. We're going to talk about all of that. But in today's episode, we're just talking about Endgame. And what we get is, in my estimation, kind of an anti-message. And that is especially frustrating given what time travel stories are supposed to do. Now, at its core, we have a story in which Admiral Janeway shows up, techs the tech, and decides to rewrite history according to her preferences, and no one else really questions it. There's no discussion of the audacity of that choice. There is no acknowledgement of the people living in 2404 and what they lose when their reality is erased. So we're simply told to accept that Janeway's regrets equal righteousness, and that her way is the right way. Boom, end of story, done. And yes, I get it. Okay, the stakes are high. I love Tuvok. I love Seven of Nine. Chakotay is also a character. But this story undermines their sacrifices. It doesn't ask us to wrestle with what was lost. Instead, it sends this message that if you're special enough, like Janeway, you get to rewrite the parts of your life that hurt or inconvenience you. No lesson there, no consequence, just a do-over. Compare that, we talked about it earlier, compare that to Year of Hell. The sci-fi pretense is similar. Timeline changes, consequences, etc. But that episode had a real-world lesson underneath all that timey-wimey plotline, that you can't live in the past. You can't let regret dictate your choices. You learn, and you move on. Because the life you have, with all of its loss and all of its messiness, that is the life that is real. That's what gives it meaning. Now look, Voyager is a story about found family, about surviving isolation, enduring trauma, still holding each other up. That only matters if those struggles stick. If everything can be erased with a wave of trans-temporal magic, then none of it means anything. Now look, Endgame gets compared to All Good Things a lot. They're both finales, they're both time travel stories, but where All Good Things tells us that the trial never ends, this one says, look, just cheat your way to a better outcome. So if maybe you're looking for a better lesson from the whole time travel subgenre of sci-fi, I will turn to a different time traveler. As Doc Brown once told his young friend, your future hasn't been written yet. No one's has. Your future is whatever you make it. So make it a good one. So Norman, as we wrap up Endgame, what is your Endgame?
Time travel. Since my first day on the job as a Starfleet captain, I swore I'd never let myself get caught in one of these godforsaken paradoxes. The future is the past is the future. It all gives me a headache.
That was so good.
Remember that Janeway? I love that
Janeway.
I love that Janeway.
She's great.
But, coming to this episode, time literally has changed her. And it really made me think about Admiral Janeway's conspiracy. to alter the past.
That's what it is. Yeah.
You said it. You said that no one had a problem with it. Barclay didn't have a problem with it. The Doc really didn't have a problem with it. Morale didn't have a problem with it. They all conspired to get Janeway to that point. So allow me to take us on a moral sojourn, if you will. That's a good name for an album, too.
Oh, that's no good. Yeah.
It's so Prague. Dom, do with that as you will. If Endgame is anything, it's a warped version of Janeway's strategy to defeat the Kobayashi Maru, the legendary unwinnable scenario that she decides she must win, no matter the cost, including this case, cheating death itself. But even more disturbingly, she does so at the cost of her personal code of Starfleet honor. Remember, if you believe in the timeline that I believe in, Admiral Janeway is the Janeway who makes it to Earth, in the timeline forged by the 7 years we as the audience witnessed throughout this series. This isn't a different Janeway. This is the same person who time and again placed Starfleet's moral code and the prime directive above all else, above her personal attachments, her emotions, and even her survival until now. And this raises the central ethical question of this episode. If you have the power to make both time and death bend to your will, then why even bother learning the lesson of the no-win scenario? We first learned the meaning behind this test from Admiral Kirk, as he said to Savick in the elevator scene in The Wrath of Khan, there is no correct resolution. It's a test of character. We learn by doing. When Kirk tells Savick those words, he's not talking about strategy, he's talking about humility. When he confesses to David later that his cleverness at quote-unquote cheating death was a mistake, he understands the purpose of the test isn't to win, but is to face loss and grow from it. In Endgame, Admiral Janeway does exactly the opposite. She just doesn't cheat death. She helps her younger self cheat death too. And in doing so, she robs Captain Janeway of the very agency and moral authority that defined her command for 7 years. So instead of facing the moral consequences of her past decisions and the crew members that she had lost and the pain that she's endured and the lessons that she has learned, Admiral Janeway weaponizes future knowledge to outmaneuver fate itself. She knows every Borg countermeasure. She knows every technical weakness. She knows every way to rewrite and reset the board. It's the ultimate cheat code. But Star Trek, that's not the point. Cheating isn't the point of taking the test. It's the test itself. How do you face the no-win scenario that defines your character? And a great deal of leadership is defined through loss and pain. Kirk says in The Final Frontier, "Damn it, Bones, you're a doctor. You know that pain and guilt can't be dispelled with the wave of a magic wand. They're the things we carry with us, the things that make us who we are. If we lose them, we lose ourselves." That is the lesson that should have been at the moral center of Endgame. But tragically, it isn't. And because that's exactly what Admiral Janeway tries to do. She wants to wave away the pain and the guilt that made her who she was. And in doing so, she weakens the potential lessons and experiences that would have educated and informed her younger self. Picard tells Data in Peak Performance, "It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not weakness, that is life." The lesson that sometimes, the outcomes aren't determined by the quality of one's decisions, and the ability to handle loss is just as important as the ability to win. Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future is about growth through struggle. It's about knowledge and how empathy and cooperation elevate humanity. Endgame undermines that vision by suggesting that if the struggle hurts too much, you can always time travel back and change it as you see fit. That's not enlightenment through experience. It's control through erasure. And that's not Star Trek. That's the antithesis of it. Instead of confronting the inevitability of loss and showing that how we deal with death is at least as important as how we deal with life, Endgame rewrites the rules so that no one has to learn that lesson. It's not about building character. It's about avoiding consequence. And if Star Trek's heart beats in its moral growth and its willingness to face the hard truths of morality and sacrifice and responsibility, then Endgame fails that test. Because in the end, the Kobayashi Maru isn't meant to be beaten. It's meant to show us who we are when we can't win. And after 7 years of watching Captain Janeway and her crew's personal growth, I think that Voyager's audience deserved a far more fitting finale than one last push of the reset button. Once again, and for the last time for Voyager, as we come to the end of our coverage for Endgame, I invoke Rush's timeless lyrics from Prime Mover from their album Hold Your Fire to keep close to our hearts Harry's sentiment about the journey. From the point of conception to the moment of truth, at the point of surrender to the burden of proof. From the point of ignition to the final drive, the point of the journey is not to arrive. Anything can happen.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, it's time to take a break and look back at Voyager. Then it's on to the 22nd century when Mission Log begins the coverage of Enterprise.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Tom Kozak, Mike Richards, Mike Schabel, and Paul Shadwell. I've spent many cycles calculating the one way to have a more disappointing ending for Voyager, and I believe I have the answer. They should have saved the Silver Blood crew for this episode. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.